All right, let's dive into something that sounds simple, but is actually, incredibly complex. Tax. Specifically, we're going to see how a massive system like SAP BRIM handles it all. We're going to follow the tax data as it makes its way through the entire process. It's pretty fascinating stuff. So let's just think about this for a second. Imagine you're a global company. You've got customers everywhere. Different cities, states, even countries, and every single one of them has its own unique tax rules. How in the world do you calculate millions of these tiny, unique tax amounts accurately every single day? It's a huge headache, right? Well, in the world of SAP BRM, the answer is kind of surprising. It's this powerful idea: defer, then calculate. You'd think you'd want to calculate the tax right away, but nope. BRIM says, hold on, let's wait. It's all about patience, waiting for the perfect moment when all the pieces are in place. This is where the magic really starts.
Okay, so this whole defer then calculate thing, it's not just a nice idea. It is the core principle for how BRIM handles tax. It's all about letting the specialists do their job when it really counts. So you've got these two main players, Convergent Charging, or CC, and Convergent Invoicing, CI. Think of CC as the first person on an assembly line. It's brilliant at figuring out pricing and usage, how much you used. But when it comes to taxes, CC basically says, not my department. It intentionally passes that job down the line to Convergent Invoicing. This separation of powers is what makes the whole system work so well.
Okay, so if Convergent Invoicing is the one handling the tax, you might be asking, how does it keep up with all the crazy tax laws in places like the US or Canada? And the answer is, it doesn't. It calls for backup. It brings in the experts. And this is where it gets really slick. It's like a perfectly choreographed dance in 3 steps. Step 1, Convergent Invoicing gathers up all the info it needs. Step 2, it makes a quick call out to an external tax specialist, like Vertex. And Step 3, the specialist does the math, figures out the exact tax, and sends the numbers straight back to SAP. Boom, done. So how do these two different systems talk to each other so smoothly? It's all thanks to something called an RFC, or Remote Function Call. The name sounds technical, but just think of it as a special, secure phone line. SAP uses it to call the tax engine, ask, hey, what's the tax on this, and get an answer back in a split second. It's a digital handshake.
And this isn't some hacky workaround. SAP designed this system this way from the ground up. There's a specific built-in trigger for this exact purpose. The technical name is FQ Event 1110. But all you really need to know is that it's like a dedicated button that gets pushed every single time an invoice is ready. It makes the whole thing super reliable.
Now, this whole process isn't just about being fast and efficient. It's also about being totally transparent and, legal. Every single one of these calls to the tax engine is logged. It's all recorded in a database table, so if an auditor comes knocking and says, show me how you got this number, you can just pull up the entire history. It's a perfect auditable paper trail, which is an absolute must-have in finance. All right, so we've got our tax number back from the experts, but we're not done yet. Now that number has to be officially recorded in the company's books, the general ledger. This is where the numbers really start to count. So how does the system know where to put this tax money? Well, it starts with something called a tax determination code. Just picture it like a signpost. The system looks at the transaction and says, okay, this is a sale of X, and that automatically assigns a code that points it in the right direction. And that signpost, that determination code, is just the first step. It tells the system to look up the next instruction in a big table. This table is like a massive address book of tax rules. It says, for this code, in this country, you need to use this specific tax code. It's what ensures you're using the right rate for New York versus, say, Tokyo.
And that's the final piece of the puzzle. That tax code is the destination. It gives the system the exact coordinates, the specific general ledger accounts for where to post the money. Every single cent is accounted for, perfectly.
Okay, so the numbers are all sorted out in the background. Now let's look at what the customer actually sees. How does all this complex calculation turn into a simple, clear line item on an invoice?
First, it's really important to know there are 2 different kinds of documents here. You've got the billing document, which is like the kitchen's internal order ticket. It's just a summary of all the charges for the company's own records. Then you have the invoicing document. That's the final legal bill that actually goes to the customer. And all that tax magic we just talked about, it happens right as that final invoice is being created.
And when you look at that final invoice, the tax isn't hidden away in the fine print. No way.
It's right there, out in the open. There's a tax total section, and the tax itself gets its own separate line item. It's all about being transparent, which, as you know, is super important for keeping customers happy.
So, how do we make sure that invoice looks just right every time? Well, it's not by magic. It all comes down to a few key settings in the system that control exactly how it all gets presented.
It really comes down to a few critical configuration steps. Think of it like a checklist. First, you define a tax display key. That's basically the style guide for how the tax looks. Then, you assign that key to the invoice type you're using. And last, you tell the system to use a specific set of rules, a posting area, to make sure the money goes to the right GL accounts. It's a simple chain of command that guarantees everything is accurate and consistent.
But wait, there's more. For companies that want to get really granular with their financial data, SAP has this incredible feature called Enhanced Account Assignment. And honestly, this is where things get next level smart.
So what does it do? Well, instead of just seeing one big bucket of tax expense, this feature lets a company see exactly which parts of the business are responsible for that tax. It can actually split a single tax line item and say, okay, 30% of this tax came from Profit Center A and 70% came from Profit Center B. This is a game changer for managers who need to understand financial performance at a really deep level.
So there you have it. We've followed the entire journey. From that clever initial decision to wait, to calling in an outside expert for the calculation, and all the way to a perfectly clear, totally compliant, and completely auditable final invoice.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? I mean, if a system can automate something as notoriously complicated as global tax calculation this well, what other messy, complex financial processes are just waiting to be streamlined? What's the next big thing for automation?